Welcome to the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bello. Today, we've got Kimberly Snyder on the show. Kimberly, welcome.
Hey, Chris. It's great to be here today. Very
Great to
excited
have
to
you.
chat.
Yes, and we're going to be talking about your book that is going to be out as of this podcast. Everyone go check it out because it's out this week.
Yeah, very exciting. It's called You Are More Than You Think You Are. And this is my sixth book, Chris, and this feels completely different in every way. The whole process, the whole writing of it, everything about this book is so different than the other ones. And I have to say that this, from my heart, I'm really excited to share this, what I'm calling my full playbook. First time I'm really giving the playbook for living your highest potential, creating abundance, vitality, real confidence, working with your energy in a bigger way. So
Absolutely.
here it
Well,
is this
thank you.
week.
Yeah, I cannot wait to share this with everyone. So everyone, you're going to get so much value out of today's episode, and make sure to check out the book as well. I'll drop the links in the show notes. But Kimberly, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I've got your bio pulled up. You know, you've published several books, spiritual guide, meditation teacher. Who is Kimberly?
So Kimberly is unique, formless energy at the core, right? Like it's so funny you asked this question, Chris, because the title of the book is You Are More Than You Think You Are, which we'll get
Right.
into in a moment. So yes, like who we really are can't really be, labeled or quantified, but in this, in the sense and for the podcast, for anyone who's listening to, what do you do in the world? I am an author. Like I mentioned, this is my sixth book. My previous books, 3 of them have been New York Times bestsellers. They've been around wellness. So different aspects, Ayurveda, nutrition, spirituality, which I define as creating more awareness of who we are to create more freedom and more power in our lives. So I'm an author. I'm an entrepreneur. I have a wellness brand called Solluna, Solluna, which means sun and moon. So we have offerings in our 4 cornerstones of wellness, which are food, body, emotional well-being, and spiritual growth. We have everything from supplements to skincare, online courses, meditations, an online community called the Solluna Circle. I'm also a podcast host. My podcast is called the Feel Good Podcast. I'm a wife. I'm a mama. I have 2 sons. One is 18 months, almost 18 months, and one is 5 years old. And I live we'll go down the whole thing. I live in Los Angeles and Hawaii. So we're split. We go back and forth.
Okay, cool. So between Los Angeles and Hawaii, you're not suffering. It's like, those are 2 cool places. You know, you got ocean and water around. So not bad at all. Thank you for sharing.
Not bad at all. And I will say, Chris, so much of this book and these teachings and these techniques are really about consciously creating what we want, which comes from, my 3-step process, which we could talk about in a moment. But, I talk about in this book, there's a chapter on abundance. And so creating these houses, being able to live in the places where I really wanted to live was part of this process of really tuning into the true self, and that unlocking that power that allows us to create the best stuff in our lives.
Absolutely. I love that manifestation and just visualization of where you want to be. And life by design is a phrase that I always love hearing, of like creating life and being intentional. So obviously that goes into understanding where you want to be, but let's dive into that. What is that 3-step process? I'd love to hear.
Yes. And also, I'll start off by saying that I went through thousands of pages of ancient texts. So like the Upanishads, the Vedic texts, which are the oldest texts on the planet. And then I distilled down these teachings, which I was, fortunate enough to discover when I was backpacking through India about 10 years ago. Maybe I'll tell the story. Can I tell the story, Chris?
Yeah. Let's hear about it.
So it's these teachings, but I just want to say that there's a lot of supportive science, Chris, as you've read the book, you go through it, and then personal stories. So we see that, yes, we all love trends, biohacking, new studies, new things that are coming out. But at the same time, there's so much value in the old. And then the ancient is really old. So there's so much power and applicability and practicality for our lives today in order, again, to create the lives that we want, that comes from this old material that most people don't have access to because it's buried in these dense texts. So I'm really excited to bring it forward. And what I wanted to say, Chris, again, back to my background quickly, is I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I went into college with a partial science scholarship. So at one point I thought I might be a doctor, but then I interned in a hospital one summer and I realized it wasn't the path for me, shall we say.
Mhm.
So I was a seeker, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I started to backpack around the world. And when I say I was a seeker, I know how to feel better in myself and my body. I was bloated. I didn't know how to eat. I had a lot of anxiety. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I was obsessed with grades, a lot of insomnia. So I started traveling because, that's what you do when you're 21 years old, I guess. You don't know what to do. And I thought it might be a few weeks, but it ended up being over 3 years and over 50 countries.
Wow.
So I was mostly in Asia and Africa, but some Eastern Europe and South America. And the reason I say this is because I was out of the Western world, Chris. So it was like I was able to reframe and create this whole new expanded perspective of energy, of success, of purpose, of health, of all of these things. And so the country that had the biggest impact on me was India. And I was there for 3 months and then I circled around again and came back for another extended period. But this is where I started to learn about these teachings. I started to learn about yoga and meditation for the first time from source. And what I learned is, oh, this isn't about doing a bunch of poses. This isn't just about relaxing. This is about union. The word yoga means union. So union with this deeper part of us, which I'll get into in a second in this 3-step process. But I started to apply these teachings, Chris, and I got back to the United States after 3 years. I moved to New York City because I'm originally from the East Coast and I had no money. And I'm here where I started, which is, what do I do with my life? I went traveling. I still don't know. But I was starting to, again, work with these practices, Chris, and I was starting to see patterns emerge in my life. Just things were happening. And I started a free blog. I just was really passionate about sharing what I learned. And then I was going back to teach yoga asanas. And then I also was going back to nutrition school. And so what happened was I was, again, creating, moving from this energy, aligning to this true self part of me, and things just started to happen. It was like I stepped into this river, into this flow. My first celebrity found me. I don't own the TV to this day, so I wasn't trying to get into this world, but she found me. Then I got on a film set, and then I started working with all these people and helping them feel their best. So for the next 5 years, I became this, celebrity wellness expert, and I was traveling with people like Channing Tatum and Reese Witherspoon and Chris Hemsworth and, Drew Barrymore, all these people around the world. And it was really interesting because I was sitting back saying, this is interesting how my life is turning out. And then I created my brand, and then I was doing a regular guest on Good Morning America. And then the book deal started happening. And the reason I tell you this story is, the funny thing is, it was HarperCollins who was my first publisher. And I had a manuscript. I'd written about 5 chapters called Catching the Fire. And it was a travel memoir with the teachings in this current book, Chris. And what she did is she looked at my website and she said, oh, well, the food and the recipe stuff seems to really be taking off. So why don't we do that part first? And we'll do this part second. So the first, that book, took off. Was called The Beauty Detox Solution, sold like 1 million copies. So then the second book was food. But by the third book, I was starting to come back to this more holistic perspective. And in the 4th book, I wrote with Deepak Chopra. And then the 5th book was mind, body, a lot of research heavy. And then this book, Chris, is, it's been building in me now for like 10 years. So this is the playbook. And this is, I'm glad, some timing is everything in many ways. And I'm really glad I didn't write it 10 years ago, because so much has happened. And I'm really in a much grittier, place, a lot more raw, more real. But I could explain this process and really go into what the true self is.
Yeah. What a crazy journey. I mean, just 3 years you're backpacking, because I went backpacking a little bit and then I had just started a relationship. And so I bought a return flight for a month later. So everyone thought I was crazy. They're like, you quit your job and you're only backpacking for a month?
Yeah. I mean, we don't know how things unfold.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a funny thing about traveling. Like for me, like I said, this, and the subtitle of the book is Practical Enlightenment for Everyday Life. So enlightenment means freedom. It means more awareness. And so for me, when I look back at that time, I was trying to create more freedom in my life, freedom from the anxiety, freedom from feeling small and limited. And being on the road gave me that opportunity. But I don't think that we all need to travel to experience that. It's really about just getting on this path It's not about changing your whole life or spending hours and hours a day, doing something different. It's about realigning to this true self. And so I keep saying this term, Chris, maybe I should define it. What do you think?
Wait, which term? The alignment, you
Self,
said?
true
The
self.
the true
True
self.
self,
Let's hear it. What's the definition?
so it's really the core of these teachings. And then that's what gets into the process for creating your best stuff. So, again, you are more than you think you are. Well, then it begs the question, like, who do we think we are? And back to the labels, back to this part of us, this outer shell, which in yogic terms is called the ego.
Mhm.
So it's this, what Wayne Dyer calls the less than 2% of who we really are. It's what we look like. It's what we're doing out in the world. It's everything that our five senses discern and perceive in the external world. So it's basically our peripheral nervous system. So physical eyes looking out, the way we hear things, the way we touch and taste. So it's all of this. And so, of course, we want to look our best. And of course, we want to hone our skills. And we are in this physical world. But at the same time, when we over identify with this part of us, with this egoic part, how much money do I have? What does my hair look like today? How many followers do I have on social media? How successful is my business? The problem with over identifying with these things is they fluctuate, right? It goes up and down. And so if our self-worth is tied to that, then we suffer more and more. And we start to get more and more blocked by fear. And the fear is no one's going to love me. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm, whatever, all the ways in which we keep ourselves small and limited. So what we need to do, Chris, because the solution isn't found where the problem is. So in order to expand our lives, in order to be abundant and to create our best stuff, we go, instead of trying to shine up the ego, we go to a different place. And this place is the true self. So this part of us, Chris, is this stable, loving, infinitely creative and intelligent part of us. It's the part of us that watches our thoughts. It's the voice of our intuition. It's the voice of our heart. It is this formless energy. Quantum physics would say it's this gravitational field through us and around us. In spiritual terms, we could say it is spirit individualized inside of us. But we know that there is this part of us that, again, is perceiving and looking out. And so, again, this is, there's so much incredible science in the book that backs up what I'm saying, not just from quantum physics, but also, all these new fields that are emerging, like neurobiology and all the ways in which our systems come together. So, and I have quite a few neuroscientists on my podcast, and we explore this intersect between consciousness and science. But there is this deeper part of us. So when we shift to living from this place, Chris, this is the key. This is really the core key in unlocking the potential in our lives. Everything starts to open up. We start to create more opportunities without this arduous pushing and trying to grab the desperation of the ego, right? This is where we show up to life in each moment in a very different way. And so the 3-part process, and the book is in 3 sections. So the first part is getting past the biggest blocks. Otherwise, you don't get on the path in the first place. So Paramahansa Yogananda, who's the great yoga guru who brought yoga to the West, who created such a stir. He met with the president of the United States at the time, Calvin Coolidge. Speaking of entrepreneurs, Steve Jobs read his book, Autobiography of a Yogi, every single year. And when he passed, it was the only book on his iPad. And at Steve Jobs' funeral, the 700 people that were there all got a copy of Autobiography of a Yogi. So he said this was his last message he wanted to leave the world, right? So it's really powerful, not just from a personal standpoint, but also from a business standpoint. So part 1 is getting past these blocks like fear, embodying our wholeness. And then part 2 is really the more we understand and embody the qualities of the true self. So this is peace, calmness, finding our real center, real stillness, because this is where our best ideas come from inside of us. And then, intuition and other attributes. And then once we get past that, the 3rd part is where we're ready to create. So the longest chapter in the book, Chris, is actually called You Are a Creator. And this is how we work with that formless energy, this unique genetic blueprint the soul, whatever you want to say. We take this formless energy, and through these exercises and practices, we learn to pull that out of us and create outer form, whether that's our best business idea, our best creative solution, content, relationship, whatever it is. It comes from in here and then out. And that's where our best stuff comes. Most of us are doing the opposite. We're trying to create from the outside in. So, oh, look at what such and such is doing, right? Oh, their podcast is talking about this, or here's a trend. Maybe I should write up about this, or maybe I should design a product about this. Look at these studies. So we're trying to take the outside and somehow push it and meld it from inside of us. And that can work to an extent, but it's always going to feel like that arduous pushing. And we're never going to really create that magic, the most epic, creative genius ideas. So instead, this has to come from the inside and let it rise up and out of you. And there's a really specific process for doing this. And oh man, Chris, does your whole life change when you shift this way? You just feel abundant, you feel powerful, you feel truly confident, which we can talk about in a moment, because most people are living in surface confidence. And then, you have the ability to really create from your highest potential.
That's powerful, because a lot of people are living reactively. They're trying to just solve today's problems. And like you said, they're trying to like force everything from the outside to meld with the inside, when it has to be the other way around. And so a lot of people don't even know how to think about this. So obviously your book provides the blueprint on how to create from the inside out. But like, what's a good first step somebody can take? Someone who maybe doesn't even know where to begin. I guess, would it be like meditating or just sitting in silence? Is there like a quick hack? I love like a little hack or tip or anything like that on where someone could start. Cause like, it seems overwhelming sometimes. How do you become a creator?
It seems overwhelming. So let's do 2 quick practices. Okay, Chris, like this is something that anyone can do that's listening to this. So remember that when people are, when we're looking at what's going on in the world, everything started with a thought, right? We think to create, and then we start to put that into practice. But what is the precursor to thought? Energy.
Belief, energy. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So it's like, if I'm, let's say like I'm in a certain kind of energy today, then I'm going to have, different thoughts than if I'm in a different kind of energy.
Mm-hmm.
So what Yogananda talked about was this underlying energy matrix underneath all things. So often the reason we are like banging our heads is because we're focusing on the finished product, right? Or that we're focusing on what we can see. So it's like this lack energy inside of us. It's like we focus on how much money's coming in or how much money isn't coming in, right? So then we start to say one thing, we say we want to be successful entrepreneurs, or we say we want to have this sort of house or this life or whatever it is, but the energy inside of us doesn't match up to that. So that means that when we're coming from this place, we can actually repel opportunities. We can actually block ourselves. So how do we know if we're repelling, or how do we know if we're attracting in? So at any given moment, Chris, we ask ourselves this one question. And this is where we go for the answer. I'll tell you right now, the answer is not here, right? So if you're listening to this, I just pointed to my head, this mind chatter, which can often be the fear of the ego throwing us off, saying, oh, it's too scary to do that, or maybe you shouldn't do that, or this is going to get messed up, or maybe whatever it is, the mind chatter. So we want to go to a more pure place. And the purest place is the body, because the body doesn't have the same egoic reactions and triggers, things that might have happened from childhood that create patterns into adulthood or whatever it is. Our body will give us answers and wisdom if we learn how to ask. So you ask yourself this question. We're going to focus right here, pointing out to the center of my chest, which is our heart. In yogic terms, we can say Anahata chakra. And in Western terms, the Heart Math Institute. It's an incredible scientific organization that's been doing research on the actual radiating energy of the heart frequency, which is like 60 times more powerful than the mind, right? So this is measurable by science. This is backed up by science. There's a lot of supportive science here. But you tune into your heart, so the center of your chest, where your physical heart is, and you ask yourself this question: am I in the true self, or am I in ego? And if you're in true self, if you are coming from this deeper place, which the practices in the book will help you anchor there. Meaning, yes, Chris, we do want to meditate in the morning, even if it's 5 or 7 minutes. We want to just do and run around and send emails, but also we want to nurture this energy inside of us. So the more we do the other practices, we start to align more and more to this expansive energy. But moment to moment, you can say, am I in true self? Am I coming from my authentic heart? Am I coming from my best stuff? And what you'll feel when you ask that question, if you are in true self, is expansion. So it's like the universe is always expanding, right? Light is expanding. That's our true nature. So it means we feel open to ideas, open to bliss, just peaceful. It's just this energy of inclusiveness. You will feel expansive. And on the other hand, if you are an ego, you will go into your heart, and also your gut around this area. And if you're an ego, you're going to feel a little bit of tightness. So it's going to feel like constricted, because that's the energy of the ego that makes us feel small and limited, constricted. So this is the part of us that looks out and compares and judges and says, ugh, that person's stuff is so dumb. Or look at him, he's talking about this, but he's really out of shape. It's all like the meanness, the judginess, the comments, the judgment of self. All of this means we're an ego. And what that means is that frequency that we're putting out matches that closeness. So imagine this is, the place of imbalanced nervous system, fight or flight, cortisol, imbalanced hormones, our body's just not feeling good because the mind's saying, ugh, like this doesn't feel good. So if we're in this place, Chris, we want to pause before we take action, because we're not going to create our best stuff. And we're going to say something. We may say the right words, but people pick up on that nonverbal communication all the time. So we wait to send that email, to do the podcast, to speak. If we're an ego, we need to take a pause. And in the book, there's a lot of specific practices, how we shift. But I'll say right here in a simplified sense, pause, close the eyes, feel the bottoms of your feet. Feel this moment. Oh, I'm here right now, because so much of the fear lives in the mind chatter. The ego's up there. So we feel our hips sitting on the chair. If we are sitting, we put one hand on our heart, one hand on our belly. Feel the heartbeat. Feel the breath coming into the belly. If we're doing shallow chest breathing, you breathe down and you recenter. And maybe you need to go to the bathroom or go for a quick walk, but you create this awareness. Oh, I'm in this limited egoic place. Best not to create here right now. So you wait. You do your best to recenter, even if it's a percentage of the time. Life is happening, so we do our best. But this awareness and this, recentering time and time again, coming back into the body, into this present moment. Chris, that's the first practice I want to share, that, this gives us a huge tool in awareness, especially because the mind is so tricky.
Absolutely. I love that present moment, because so many times we are just going one thing to the next, one meeting after another, podcasts, right? Back to back. I know with your book launch, you probably got a million shows, and you're going to be on all kinds of like Good Morning America type stuff and traveling, right?
Actually, next week for GMA.
Yeah, awesome. So see, you're like swamped with all these different appointments and commitments, plus your family, and it's all great and exciting and new, or not new, you've done this before, but like still there's probably a little bit of like that anxiety and, oh my gosh, I have so much to do and I still have to do this, and I got to do this for the kids or whatever, that little chore or errand that you forgot to do as well. But being present and taking it one thing at a time, that's always a trick, is just coming back to this present moment and getting centered. I think that's another word you just used. Very, very powerful tip and very effective.
Yeah. So it's funny, Chris, because a lot of people say to me, how do you do all this, with the business, with the children? I'm a very hands-on mom, the book and all this stuff. And I will say that my life is really full, but it doesn't feel chaotic. It doesn't feel overwhelming. And the reason is, I love this word flow. When we're coming from this deeper place, it also comes with discernment. It means that in each moment, we come from this guidance, or what Yogananda calls the infallible counsel of the inner voice. We know where to put our energy. So I'm really present when I'm with my kids. And then if I need to shift and, I drop off my older son at kindergarten, okay, it's time to be really present with this podcast. I do that. And it's this, incredible, I will say, superpower, because it allows us to bring our energy. So we give away so much of our power by dissipating it all the time, by worrying. Worrying is lack-based thinking. So with this book, book launch, I don't feel anxiety. I feel excitement, right? We want to reframe it in our mind.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
I love
so
that.
passionate. I'm so excited about this. Because if we're like, oh, I'm worried
Oh.
about this, that means lack. That means
Lack.
things may not work out, right? We don't want to, we want to feel all our feelings. This is another part of the book, but we want to metabolize and digest the feelings similarly, like to how we do with food. Otherwise, they stay in us and they show up as insomnia, food cravings, belly fat, anxiety at work. So it's really important that we get more into our personal state of flow. And this, again, it's so practical, Chris. And there's another, speaking of practice, there's another practice I'd love to share at some point, unless you want to chat for a little more. There's a
Oh no, I'm
question you
just
want to.
taking notes because I
Okay,
know
okay,
I
great.
meditate, I do yoga, I'm centered sometimes, and I always do hear the chatter occasionally. I have to like shut it up, and say no. I'm actually reading two different books, Flow right now. I just started that, as well as Michael Singer's, what is it, The
Mm.
Untethered Soul, right? It
Oh,
talks about the internal chatter of the mind. So I'm loving this conversation. Feel free to
amazing.
what's that next step?
Okay, so it's funny. Michael Singer is actually also a student of Yogananda's. That I
Wow,
mentioned earlier. The
awesome.
students, yeah, the teachings are in this book. So he is also someone that I am connected to and love very much. So what I'll say too is, so in the book, there's an expanding the gaps practice, which we'll do right now to,
Okay.
20 seconds. And then there's 3 subsequent meditation chapters about how to go deep in an effective way to meditate, to connect to the true self. And I just want to make this distinction, Chris, because just like a lot of things in the Western world, we tend to take these really rich, deep concepts and we can butcher them in the West.
Yep.
So just the way that, a lot of us think yoga is these physical poses, that's like less than 1% or, tiny, even fraction of 1% of what yoga is. Yoga is really about, the reason the poses are there is so we can sit longer to meditate. It's about union. It's about bringing this energy again from peripheral and going into union and union into central channel, which is spine and brain. So there's so many meditations out there that are about relaxation, visualizing like this happy place and stuff. And that can be nice. I'm not, slamming it or bad mouthing it in any way, but for me, it's about going to the root, right? The rishis, the
Mm-hmm.
seers, the real, the thousands of years ago that these practices have been practiced. And so we want to create a practice that comes from a real lineage. So we know that it's effective. And then we experience that in our bodies. So I just want to say that the 3 subsequent chapters in all of the book are based in these really ancient teachings. And I love this word rishi. Rishi means seer in Sanskrit. So it's again, when we're in ego, we're just looking out with our physical eyes. But when a seer means we see more with the third eye, which is this place we can focus in meditation. And the science shows that focusing here actually activates this back of our brain, this part of our brain stem called the medulla oblongata. And so this ganglion of nerves, we start to activate different parts of our brain, which are expansion, creativity, and so on. So there is a lot of science here. So I wanted to demonstrate the expanding the gaps practice, which comes before the meditation. So this is a very preliminary practice, but it's powerful if you do it, Chris, because what it does is it gives us this experience. So the book is about wisdom, changing our perspective, but the experiential knowing, which only comes from practice. This is our energy that we're working with.
Mm-hmm.
So when we touch stillness, not just as a concept that you hear and you read about in an article, you hear about in a podcast, but you experience it now. And this is, one of the laws of the universe and quantum physics. It starts to expand. And we keep talking about expansion, like the universe is expanding, light is expanding. So when you put energy and attention into something, it starts to expand. So you start to understand on an experiential level what stillness is. And then it can expand in your life in less reactivity, right? More pauses between your thoughts. So that authentic part of you is really speaking the infallible counsel of the inner voice. You start to be more peaceful. You start to discern where you do and do not put your energy. You start to have more power behind your words, less idle chatter. Again, more creative, genius solutions. So finding stillness is a really powerful thing to do. And what the Vedic texts teach us is that true stillness comes, we start to build it in our life when we focus on this one part of life that we actually experience in these micro moments, the micro moments, Chris, between the inhales and the exhales. So it's here where we're not actually doing in the sense of even breathing in and breathing out. And it's here that we start to expand. So let's experience it. You heard me talk enough here. Let's get into this, Chris. If anyone that's listening to this, if you have the opportunity to close your eyes, please do. Otherwise, if you're driving or walking your dog, you can still do the practice. Just please don't close your eyes. Okay. But you and I will close our eyes, Chris. And we're just going to do it for like 20 seconds, 15 seconds. So all you're going to do now is just close your eyes and exhale deeply out through your lungs. And now we're going to inhale for a count of 4, nice and slow. So inhale, 2, 3, 4, and pause full at the top. So keep the breath in your lungs. And then slow exhale for a count of 4, 2, 3, 4, and pause empty at the bottom. And again, inhale, 2, 3, 4, and pause full at the top, completely calm. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, pause empty at the bottom. And inhale. And just starting to return to normal breath, nice and slow, all the way down into your belly. So that was like a micro. And then when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. That was like a micro part of this. Usually we want to do this practice for at least 5 minutes, but you can see if you really put your attention in here that those moments of just beingness, right? This potential inside of us, this stillness, this 0 point field. When we drop into that, and that becomes part of our practice. Again, it doesn't mean we're doing this all day, every day, but 5-7 minutes in the morning, which are what the practical enlightenment meditations that I put out free, by the way, on our Solluna site and also our Solluna app, means that we are tuning into this inner energy. So we're not just out here in the world doing, like you said, Chris, running around from podcast to meeting to Zoom to, but we are connecting to this expanded place. So for me, one of the incredible benefits of this work is that my relationship with time has really shifted.
Yeah.
This idea of moment expanded. It is true. When you go in, you drop below the surface. Think about how choppy it is on the surface of the ocean, but you go underneath and there is this place, this resource. This is the true self. This is, where this calmness and this peace rises up inside of you. And this stability, this courageousness, we're like, oh my gosh, where did these ideas come from? This is the place we want to channel from. This is the place we want to create our business from. This is the place we want to write from. This is the place we want to speak to our employees, our colleagues, our friends, our loved ones from, right? This is this deeper place. This is who we really are, Chris. We're not this outer shell. There's this eternal part of us. Again, I keep using the word stable because in life, so much is up and down, right? Look at the news, look at everything outside. The market changes, people's opinions change, all this stuff. But yet at the same time, if we're connected to this place of stillness and this depth inside of us, it means we can rise up to any moment. We can deal with anything that comes our way with clarity and with strength and with resilience. And so you can see that that's the precursor for going deeper and deeper into self with a capital S, not the little self.
That's powerful. I wrote that down. I love that that visual of just the choppy water on the surface, and then really, if you go below, I'm thinking I've gone scuba diving a few times, and it's very choppy up at the top. But as soon as you go in, it's like, whoa, there's no waves down here. There may be a little bit of currents, and you see some like fish floating by, but that's where the stillness is, and that's where the magic happens.
That's where the magic happens. And, we spoke a little bit about confidence, Chris, so maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that. there's two kinds of confidence. First of all, there's surface confidence, and then there's true confidence.
Yeah.
We think about surface confidence and how much it relates to what we're talking about. It's based on these external measurements. People say, oh, well, I'm confident because my stock price is this, or this is the revenue we pulled in this month, or this is how many followers I have on social media, or this is how much I weigh, or look at my, I don't know, muscles today, how much I bench press, all this stuff out here. And it's okay to feel, of course, like we're human. So we're going to feel, proud of ourselves. Sometimes we're going to, feel good about certain things. But this is not where we are to derive our true confidence from, Chris. And why? Again, everything, like I'm saying, everything's external. Everything's changing. If another tech company comes and your stock price plummets, where does your confidence go? You gain 10 pounds over the holidays and you didn't lift your weights. What happens to your body? Your self-worth is in that. What happens? You gain all this weight, or you get sick and you don't do anything for a week, whatever it is. Yep. Our confidence can't be in something as flimsy as the external world, which is constantly shifting and changing. So how are we supposed to be confident? And confidence is powerful, Chris, because when you show up in confidence, it's a very different energy. You walk into the room and people will be like, oh my gosh, what is that guy up to? I want to go see, I want to talk to him. I want to see how maybe we can collaborate. Like, what is this? It's an energy that can be felt and experienced. It's not something that we can buy. It's not something that we can intellectualize. So where are we supposed to get it? So there is a full chapter in the book called You Are Confident. And I go into a lot of the practices and the ways that we keep unpacking the surface stuff and all the ways we've controlled, Chris, and all the false identities. But underneath that, it's like layers of an onion. Underneath that is the very core. And this goes back to when Moses asked the Almighty, in ancient times, what is this? What are you? And the Almighty had one statement to give: I am that I am. So think about that, Chris. Power.
That always confused me. I went to Catholic school and I was like, what? I am that I am? Like, I guess that's all knowingness, right? Power.
No. Source. Well, like God is that, right? Spirit source is that. We are, back to the ocean analogy, everything comes from source, like this central intelligent energy. Then we are waves of the ocean. So the ocean can exist without the wave, but we can exist without the ocean, right? So yep. I am that I am. Just hear me say it, Chris. Feel the expansion, the freedom, and the power of that. What it means is I am a unique, alive, breathing creation of spirit. That is my true nature. There is no one like me. I am like no one else. I can compare myself to no one. No one can compare themselves to me. I show up in this different frequency. I bring a different way of looking at things, of creating, of doing business, of speaking, whatever it is. I am that I am. And when we root down into this, it's like layers, Chris, and these practices help us go into the shadow, into the darkness, into, past the clinging and the attachments of all the labels and all the ways we've constructed this false identity. And when we go into this energy of I am that I am, which is completely possible for all of us, I believe that is our unique, that is our birthright. Each and every single one of us are meant to be in this full potential energy. But then we get, there's an amazing quote from Yogananda saying, you have it already. That the diamond's in you. You are it, but you need to scrape off the mud from the soul. So it's like all these layers of all the ways we've dulled ourselves down and watered ourselves down. And we feel like we're this stuff. But underneath that is this I am that I am energy waiting to burst forward. We need to connect to it, though. We need to ignite it inside of us. We need to live it in our practices and in our meditations and in the ways that we reframe things. And then our whole lives, just this expansive energy just opens up more and more. And we watch what you create, that, watch the opportunities, the way that your business runs, everything changes. And I've seen this in my own life, Chris, and I've seen this in so many people's lives that I've worked with and shared these teachings with. So on this scale, with the book, again, I'm just really excited because I think we should all have access to this stuff. I think that, again, a lot of this is buried in ancient times and, it's old texts and dusty old writings. So it's not really accessible, but that is my intention with this book, to allow us to use these teachings to benefit all of our lives.
Yeah, that's powerful. Just knowing these tools that I guess we already had access to, but like you said, they've been buried. They don't teach this stuff in school, right? I don't remember ever reading any of
No,
this stuff in any class that I've ever taken. Maybe
no.
more in yoga. I've learned more about this in yoga and through going to yoga classes and meditations than actual like school curriculum, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're taught a very like a very linear pathway. And, it's just we can get into that. That's another subject, is like our educational system. But I think here we are, and anybody listening to this is, obviously we're here because we want to live our fullest potential. I think that is our nature. I also think we're here to share with one another and to support each other. And
Mhm.
so because I think with this book too, Chris, I wasn't looking to write another book, to be honest. I was 34 weeks pregnant with my second son when this idea came through, like, and I didn't know what to do because I was looking to slow down at that point. I was going to third trimester, like, what's going on here? So I reached out to Deepak Chopra, who was my co-author now 3 books ago. I said, Deepak, I don't know what to do. I told him about the book and he said, oh, this book belongs with Hay House, which is my third publisher after Random House. So then, next thing I know, Deepak connects me with Reed Tracy, the president. And he said, Reed said, what's your book about, Kimberly? And I told him this idea. And a few days, I was presenting it over Zoom. I wrote a sample chapter. And then it was 3 days before I gave birth that I signed the book deal, Chris. And then 60 days afterwards that I started writing. And like I said, this book has just completely different than the other ones. Even though it was COVID and my older son was not in preschool, so I had 2 babies at home and so much going on. I look back, I'm like, how did this book get written? And the answer is it wanted to be here. It just came through. And, again, I feel like this timing and where we are, there's so much confusion, Chris. There's so much fear. There's so much separation. But at the same time, I feel like this opening on the collective where people are more ready. I think people are ready now to embody the true self. People are ready to go past the ego and ready to find this deeper place of security and stability inside of each of us. So, the other thing too, Chris, is this is not about religion in any way. You can be a religion or you can be no religion. And what we're talking about here, again, is energy, oneness. Yogananda talks about this, the unifying principles. So this is just the way energy works. And you can meditate again, and you can combine that with prayer. If you're Catholic, I was raised Catholic, or if you're Muslim or Jewish, or you can be agnostic or atheist. You can be no religion. But this again is about connection. Don't let the language trip you up. You can
Right.
say the universe, you can say God, whatever word works for you, but these are truths. This is how it works. This is energy. So it is universal, and it's really exciting.
Absolutely. Because whenever you go within and just silence the noise, I think, like you said, more and more people are coming or looking for these types of tools with everything happening in the world and all the crazy news channels and, all the new variants and like transformer names and stuff going around. It's like every day you're like, what is it now? You're almost scared to like leave the house in some cases. But when you go within, you kind of go to that place beneath the waves where it's still and quiet, and sensory deprivation is really good. I've been doing like float sessions lately where, there's no sound, there's no light, you're floating, you're kind of like weightless, and you don't have all the noise and distractions, the cars beeping, the phone
Yeah.
ringing, right? It gets very overwhelming and stressful. So learning to silence that and just sit in silence and kind of harness that inner energy, that is something that more and more people are hopefully looking for and finding access to.
Yes. And I think that some of those, devices and the biohacking and, the flow tanks and all of that is really great in modern life, just to kind of supplement and to give us that space. But it doesn't, of course, replace the daily practice of being
Right.
able to sit with the spine lifted. And so much of these Vedic texts talk about the importance of the lifted spine. So you're not going to get that from a float tank. You're not going to get that from these other modalities, but I think they're beneficial in helping us, deal with stress and helping us align. But, Yogananda talks about trying to meditate with a bent spine is like trying to shoot an arrow with a bent bow,
Oh,
right?
wow. That's a good
So
one.
much about this alignment of our vertebrae
And the
how
chakras.
the chakras and just how this aligns, from all the way from the lumbar all the way to the cervical. And that's why we want to make sure our chin is parallel when we're meditating. So we're not pinching any nerves. We're, not jutting forward the way we're always on our cell phones and computers. So I'll say that also, it's the daily practice that gives us the benefits. So yes, it's great to go in, do some, IV drips, do the mitochondria machines, do the flow tanks, do all that stuff. But it's really how we shift our energy is day in and day out in our morning routine, our morning practice, and throughout the day. So if the Titanic was over 1 degree, history would have been changed, right? So it's not that we need to spend our whole day doing this, but every morning before you go into the day, if you sit and do these meditations, again, it could be 5 or 7 minutes even, you get into that practice of tuning inward before you start the day. And this will help you so much, again, with reactivity, food cravings, discerning when you're truly hungry, coming from this deeper place. You're not going to go in the float tank every morning, right? You're not going to do some of the stuff every morning. So you want to make sure that every day you're building this consistency because energy builds over time. So it's work, right? We're doing work, but I will say almost with certainty, it is not more work than you are already doing. It's a shift in focus because most of us are running around like our chickens with our heads cut off, frantically pushing more. And that just starts to melt away when we come from this centered place. We actually save so much time. So like I said, my relationship with time is so different. It's expanded. When I speak to my team, it's very directed. It's always connected. It's effective. I don't have to say so much. There's a lot more trust with delegating. I hire people. When I hire people, I'm coming from this deeper connection. So we tend to make less hiring mistakes. I'm feeling energy. I mean, I can't put into words how useful this is in our daily life. And again, throughout history, we see these great leaders like Steve Jobs using these teachings, relying on Yogananda and all of this and what it's done in his life and in the business world. So it's really exciting. One of the people that I've worked with for this book who came on my podcast, who's been working with Yogananda as well and yogic teachings is GT Dave, an amazing entrepreneur who started GT's, Synergy Kombucha. So anyways, I just want to say that this isn't like, oh, this is going to help me, rest and feel good. Yes, it does because we create this alignment. But in the deeper sense, I'm talking about really tangible results, better, higher revenue, happier team, all the measurables, right? Higher conversion rates, all of this stuff comes when we're again creating and aligning from the inside out, which is not usually the way that we're taught at all. We're taught to jam, push, do more, do all this stuff. You can do that stuff too. But when we do these practices, again, you are creating so much from this deeper place where energy builds. You're working with different parts of your brain. It's very, very powerful.
Sounds very, very powerful. And you said it's very easy to do and easy to start. You said just 5 to 7 minutes. So whenever people are doing this, do you recommend playing any kind of sounds or music or just sitting in silence and like listening to the breath? Is there anything you recommend with the 5 to 7 minutes every morning?
So there's two things as we go into the practice, formula, wordless music is fine as well. But I find that the less outer form there is, because we're going into stillness, we're going into silence. So I personally meditate in nature. I meditate in absolute silence. But I will say this too, Chris, when we're talking about, just, the morning routine and the morning practice, that is something, the experiential part. But this other quote from Yogananda, I'm really inspired to share. I'm paraphrasing a little here, right? I get really specific with quotes. I'm paraphrasing, but he says something like, a cave can be in darkness for thousands of years, but bring in the light. And it's as if the darkness was never there. So there's two parts of this process of incredible, outrageous transformation. Number one is the experiential. So we're learning these practices 5 to 7 minutes. I feel off. I'm an ego. I'm comparing. Here's a 90-second practice to realign, the things that I share throughout the book. But the second part is the wisdom, the teachings themselves. So just by reading this, and the Bhagavad Gita says this, just by having this awareness of opening, of getting on the path, of seeing these, like these teachings are meant to create epiphanies inside of us, because deep down inside of us, we are aligned to truth. And these are teachings, like I said, I never knew before I went to India, Chris, before I started getting into this. It wasn't taught to me growing up. It wasn't taught to me. Went to college. I went to Georgetown. Like none of this was there. These teachings are so powerful. So just by virtue of reading the book and going into this, the awakenings, the light, so to speak, that it shines on these shadows, these control mechanisms, these ways that we've been playing small, they expose them. So that also aligns your life just by having access to the teachings in the first place.
Yeah, you used a word there that I've been very tuned into lately, is just awareness, because so many times we're on autopilot, like we said earlier, running from one meeting to the next, never taking a second to pause. But once you're aware, you can start to like pause for just 2 seconds and say, wait a second, I'm being frantic. I'm like reacting and going from one thing to the next. What if I just spend 5 minutes in silence, go out in nature, reset, get centered again, and then approach the second half of my day? So there is one guy, I listened to his podcast, and he says he does meditations twice a day. And the afternoon meditation helps reset him to have that second win and develop more energy. Instead of drinking like a 5-hour energy or an energy drink, the meditation is what provides that energy from within.
Yes. So in my practice, there's the morning meditation, there's the evening meditation, sort of, close out, recenter. So the book ends on the day. And then
Awesome.
during the day, there's the practices and mini meditations, like a 1-minute meditation, which I also talk about, to keep us aligned, right? Because we're in this expansive place, and then we kind of go off in the day and then things get crazy.
Things get crazy.
So over time, and I've been doing this now for, 10 years, over 10 years, I'll say that we start to live in between the meditations more in this true self place, just by virtue, again, of consistency and repetition. We show up every day. We do our time in meditation. We sit, we do this, we live this, we introspect. That's a big part of the practice is looking at my life and my reactions. And why does this bother me so much? And why do I keep trying to control this? What is the fear underneath? So, in an illustrative sense, I'll say that one thing that I noticed, and when we do that, when we have this awareness of our patterns, go back to enlightenment, freedom. It means we expand past those limiting patterns. So we create so much more amazingness when we're not limited by that. So I noticed from doing this work that it really used to bother me when people would interrupt me. Let's say they didn't agree with me. So I'd go into this whole big thing and, be like, no, actually not. Right. I have all this science and all these studies and all these ideas. And so, there's a normal disappointment or like, oh, that's annoying when someone interrupts. But then it was like, almost felt like this dagger, like it was painful. Like there was this real reaction in me when, again, someone didn't agree or someone interrupted. So I started to sit with that, like what is underneath that? Because all of our patterns are mirrors. All the ways, all the people that bother us, all the things that we project out, all the things underneath that is some kind of constriction, something of the ego. And so what I found underneath that annoyance was, there's this deep, from my own childhood, this wound from, it touched on that, what I attributed in that, very limited adolescent mind. I'm not good enough to be seen and heard. So if someone was interrupting me or talking over or not agreeing, it kind of touched on that. Oh, like this pain of you're not good enough to be seen and heard. And underneath that is, well, if you're not good enough to be seen and heard, it means you are not lovable, right? You're not worthy of love. And then you're not worthy at all. It's interesting, like these reactions, which seem so minor, just the surface of life. And we often ascribe them to like, oh, well, I'm just efficient or I'm this. No, underneath anything that pulls us off, anything that we have a bigger emotional reaction, there is something in us that needs to be healed. So once I saw that core, Chris, then I was able to heal myself in that way and realize, oh, I can love myself. I can self-soothe. I can change this dialogue. I can change this inner belief. And there's so much power in that. So what that means is instead of getting annoyed in a meeting or starting to like seethe inside or get really frustrated, we stay in this fullness of non-attachment. That's the other thing. The world is going on out here and people are saying stuff. It doesn't have to affect our energy. We don't have to react in this way. And so what this does, this freedom to be open and to stay consistent and to stay calm no matter what's going on, gives us great power in life, in everything. I mean, it's such an attractive, powerful energy. Again, people will be drawn to us more. People want to work with us. People want to buy our products. People want to listen to our content and our podcasts because it's just a different energy. We're not coming from this lack place. We're coming from this place of real wholeness. We're coming from that I am that I am energy.
Yeah, that creation as well, that inner creation and energy. So really good stuff. And I know we are wrapping up at the end of the hour. This is so good. Like I'm just taking notes and I'm like, oh, running out of ink. I'm going to have to get another pen soon. But where can our audience go to connect with you to learn more? I'll obviously drop the link to the book in the show notes, but is there a great URL or your homepage that you want to direct people to? Feel free to share.
Awesome, Chris. Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having me on the Week of Launch. You are more than you think you are. Practical enlightenment for everyday life is available now everywhere books are sold. So we can say Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, so on and so forth. And then for more information on me, my website is mysolluna.com, which is SOLLUNA.com. And there's information there on the brand, on my Feel Good podcast, on all our products and offerings.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kimberly. I really enjoyed having you on the show and so much wisdom that you're sharing. And I know that the book dives in even more. So everyone make sure to go check out that book. I've got a copy right here on my desk. So thank you once again and namaste.
Hey, so much love and so much gratitude. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being a listener to the show and for checking out my message. If you've been here for a while, I'm especially grateful for you. But if you're new here, thank you once again for being a listener. Just wanted to let you know, I help people buy, sell, or rent real estate across the nation in the US. I probably could even help you across the world, but it just gets a little more difficult with time zones and setting up times to chat. If you have any questions at all, shoot me a DM on Instagram. My handle is chrisbello_, or you can also go to my website, chrisbello.com/real estate. Again, that is chrisbello.com/real estate. Happy to help any way that I can. And thank you once again for being a listener.